You're very welcome. The light in me recognizes the light in you. Codependency, a spiritual perspective. Codependency has its origins always in childhood. As children, we are a copy of a copy of a copy. We all are. So our parents, with the best intentions, with all the love in their hearts that they have for us, doing their best, they still unconsciously pass on programs and entities of thought. So even if you were to say, I'm going to do things so differently to my parents, right? As teenagers, I think we've all said this, and probably throughout our adulthood as well, especially when people have a child of their own, they'll often say, not everybody, some people will say, my parents really got it right. I'm going to honor that system, do it that way. But a lot of people will say that the needs that I didn't get fulfilled from my parents, I'm going to make sure my child has that. And that's how it works. But if you grew up in a household where you felt responsible as a child for the adults around you's happiness, contentment, you were part of a system that made sure that their needs were met, like perhaps you were asked to raise your brothers and sisters when your parents who were struggling with their own demons, that should have been their role. Or perhaps you had an overbearing parent. You may have a mother wound where your mother was unconsciously engaging with you in a system of enmeshment where the energies are enmeshed and you don't know who you are because she has engulfed you so much that you've lost the truth of who you are separately from the mother, right? That's a big mother wound. Many, many people today are recognizing that they have a mother wound and how it's affected their relationships, their job life, how they are standing up to the world. So you also may have had this with a father figure, right? It doesn't have to be the mother wound, it could be a father wound. But if you had a guardian, a caregiver who was part of your everyday rearing of you, who expected you to keep them happy, to people please, perhaps you were told how to behave around other family members. Perhaps you were told how to behave in front of neighbors or in the community. Your own self-expression was stifled, repressed, or sometimes just completely ignored. You had to develop a codependent nature with that parent or parents, or for some people, an entire family around them, because you had to survive. And part of your survival instinct was, well, if I keep the peace here, if I keep my mother happy and content and do as she says, even though my instinct, my own gut is telling me to do something else, you were basically trying to get through, and the only word for it is to survive the discomfort, and for some people, the pain and neglect of that experience. And that was a very wise thing, because as a child, you needed to ensure that the people who fed you, who washed you, who put a roof over your head, were happy with you and kept doing that, kept providing those needs. So it's a very clever mechanism. It's very, very intelligent in its design. The problem is when you've been doing that right through childhood into your teenage years, it's very hard to just suddenly stop this negative program, this survival mechanism, which again had its place in your childhood. It's very hard just to say, well, I'm 21, so I'm going to stop people pleasing and I'm going to stop engaging in this codependent dynamic with people I have a personal relationship with. It's all very unconscious. And because you are familiar, it's a comfort to be in the kind of loving relationships that mirror what you had with your mother or father or guardians. That is what you will tend to go towards. You see, we are attracted to people that carry and embody the matching frequency or energy that we had growing up. So it's very common for people who grew up, those of you who know my channel know I've done a lot of work with people in addiction recovery. And I would see this pattern over and over again. It's very common for people who grew up in households with addiction to be attracted in their adulthood to a partner who is also in addiction or has some kind of addictive tendencies, because it's familiar. It's what the inner child associates with love. Your first experiences of love is with usually the mother and the father. So whatever way they engage with you, the dynamic you had with them is going to be reflected in the attraction, in the relationships that you are attracted to. You'll often be magnetized, especially in your 20s and 30s. I've noticed patterns, you'll be more inclined to get into relationship patterns with people that truly match either the mother you had an enmeshment wound with, where you had to please her all the time, and you weren't allowed to make your own decisions, perhaps because she ruled over or controlled your decisions and your choices. Or your father, who maybe your father was schizophrenic, or he was an alcoholic. Maybe he was gruff and rough. And, for some reason you find that you're attracted to gruff and rough men. These are examples of how the attachment wound of childhood will play out. So codependency, not just in romantic relationships, we bring it into, it filters in, it flows like water, like a leak in a ceiling that starts off as a tiny drip. It drips and drips and drips, and before you know it, that entire floor is flooded if it's not tended to, if it's not taken care of. It can be seen in our friendships. It can be seen in how we relate to our in-laws. We bring this pattern into our jobs. So you might find, because you had an overbearing parent that you had to please all the time, in your job, you have a very similar personality or traits to that parent, and you feel you have to be cap in hand. You have to be always bowing down to this boss, and your employer is overbearing and controlling, or doesn't appreciate you or value you. Maybe that was something you have with the parent. Maybe your mother never said to you as a child, well done, that was a really good job you did. So you attract friends or in-laws or people around you who treat you the same way, who never acknowledge or value your presence or your skills or your help. But truly, when we shine the light of truth on these unconscious patterns and habits, it's up to us to say, I understand that as a child, that's where that comes from. But now I'm the adult. I'm parenting that inner child now. How can I make better choices for myself? So this is about taking back your power and recognizing that you can always make a new choice, and you can always be with somebody who does meet your needs, And if you're trapped in a marriage or a friendship that you feel is one-sided, where there's the rescuer. So this is the thing about codependency. The dynamic is between the two people, whether it's a friend, your boss, your spouse. There's always this dynamic of there's a rescuer, there's somebody who is always available to save the day and will catch the fall of the other person. And then there's the victim. So we have this rescuer victim dynamic going on. So if you're just say, we'll use the example because it's pretty clear, of someone who's abusing drugs or is in addiction. They will often attract a partner because they're in victim mode, or their addictive behaviours create them to be out of alignment and a victim to their habit. They'll often attract, and it won't be very obvious. It's all very unconscious. It can be, and sometimes it is very obvious. Sometimes it's like, that's the rescuer, that's the victim, that's what's happening here. But they'll often attract somebody who will care for them, forgive their bad behavior, put up with a lot of their bad behavior. I was going to say crap. And why is that? Because this codependent pattern was modeled and shown as an example of love in childhood. Now, the interesting thing is, because I've worked with men and women in addiction, and I've worked with lots of men and women in codependent situations. Let me just move this over. Because that dynamic is associated with love, and wherever there is an unhealed wound, we will often be attracted to that. So if there's a wound within you that matches someone else, there'll be a magnetic attraction. Now, that doesn't mean the wound is identical, but it could be two opposite ends of the spectrum of the wound. That creates a very, very powerful, volatile sexual attraction. Why? Why would the soul do this? Because the soul wants to heal. The soul wants you to face that wound and to finally heal it and resolve it and move on in your life. That's why we are attracted to these relationships, especially in our 20s and 30s. So hopefully as we get older, we learn the lessons. We understand, I was attracted to this guy when I was 25. I got married when I was 26. It was a tumultuous marriage. It brought up all my childhood trauma, and I had to deal with it. I had to work through it. If I hadn't have met him, I never would have looked at it. I wouldn't have even been consciously aware of it. You learn the lesson, you heal it, you shift it, you move on. So that you are aware of your tendency to people please, to put other people's needs ahead of your own, to be the martyr, or to play the victim, or maybe to rescue and save and be the savior. And the thing is, both parties in this codependent dynamic, both people are being robbed of their power. Both people are not being authentic, and both people have huge woundings to heal. So don't think because if you're the rescuer in this dynamic that, oh, well, I'm the one who shows up and cleans up the mess, so I'm the good one here. No, that's not true. They're equally as dysfunctional. They're equally playing their role in this toxic relational dynamic. And whichever end on that stick that you fall, whether it's you're always the one with all the problems and the drama, and you go to this person and they clean it up and they pat you on the back and they wrap you up in a blanket and put you to bed, and they do all your phone calls and they clean your house, your emotional house as well as your physical house. You're both enabling each other. You're both keeping sunglasses on in the relationship. You're not actually revealing your true identity. You're not actually showing up and looking into the soul of each other in an honest way, because you're saying that you are a victim, so you need me. This is what the rescuer does. You need me to save you. I'm your savior. That ain't good. You don't need anybody. And by the way, you're not a savior, and you're not a savior for anybody but yourself. The opposite way goes the same. The person who thinks that they're a victim, who thinks that they are a martyr, or that they are somehow entitled to their victimhood, they're disempowering themselves. They're not taking accountability for their trauma, their wounds, their childhood, or whatever happened. And by you stepping in and rescuing them, you're actually denying them to learn to use those muscles to strengthen that confidence within themselves. And what you'll often find is, if you've cleaned up this frequency, this program, and you're not bringing this into your romantic relationships anymore, hello, be careful, because it can creep into this program like the water dripping from the ceiling. It can start coming down the walls. It can be in the floors. The damp can be everywhere. It can come into your relationships. Maybe you're the one who's always rescuing your friend, or maybe you're the one who's always ringing your friend and expecting her to be on the phone with you for 2 or 3 hours with all your drama. So it's not just romantic, and some people might only do this in professional setting. So maybe in your workplace, this is where you do it. You always clean up on behalf of that lazy colleague who doesn't lift a finger. And everybody is so used to you saving the day that you're just like, you resent it. You're full of repressed anger about it, but you're like, I've been doing this since childhood. I used to clean up after my mother when she'd spill bottles of wine everywhere and cans everywhere. I'm still cleaning up, metaphorically, in my job. I'm still cleaning up after other people. This is where we have to be very honest. And this time in the collective consciousness as a source channel for the collective, this is a beautiful time to get really honest and truthful about how we show up in these relationships, in these dynamics, and how do we enable each other. So when the drama comes, not going to pick up the duster and cleaner and vacuum it all up, but stepping back and letting that person with their drama own their drama. You can hold a space for them, but not reacting, staying conscious. And saying staying true to yourself by reminding that person, you can deal with this, you can manage this, you have the power, you have the muscle to do it. You don't need me to save you. And it's something I've peppered throughout all my work, all these years. I remember I was teaching out in Bray in a yoga studio, meditation, spiritual teachings, bit of yoga. And I had a client there who wrote me an amazing review, and she wrote, Aoibheann is my savior. And I thought, oh no. And I had to say to her, no one is your savior. You are your savior. God, maybe, yeah, God is your savior. But don't put your power in other people's hands. It's dangerous. And yet we do it in many ways, very unconsciously all the time. And people can even have codependency in their in-law relationships, with their cousins, with their neighbors. Like, we have to, if we have a tendency for that, it's really important that we comb through and evaluate the different dynamics in our lives and how we need to clean that up. So this is just, I'm going to do more videos on codependency. I think it's really important in this day and age, because I really feel that many cultures in our pasts have supported codependency, and might even call it like romantic love, or call it family love or family duty. This is where the word duty and loyalty can be abused and manipulated. So if you'd like to hear more on that, you can like this video so that I know this is a topic of interest to you, and I will provide more. I'd like to channel directly, bring in the source energy, and channel on this topic because I feel like high sensitives especially, and those of us who are empaths and have had turbulent traumas in our past or childhoods, this is a particularly strong dynamic. And when it goes back that far, it's so ingrained, it can take tremendous work and focus and awareness. But what I will say to you, to shift it, but what I will say to you is, half of the work of that is having the conscious awareness. This is something I've been doing. This is what you say to yourself. You say, okay, I'm aware that I have a tendency to people please, or I will set myself on fire to heat somebody else. When you hone in that sharply with that kind of awareness and that consciousness, it has to start to change because you brought it up to the surface. It's right there. It's no longer this entity unconsciously driving your life. And when you do automatically go into those responses with people, whether it's in your job or with your friend, you'll be like, oh, I'm doing it again. I'm engaging in this damn program. So maybe your friend calls and you're really busy, and usually you will just sacrifice what you have to get done to spend time listening to her problems. Classic rescuer. This is where you can go, oh, hang on a minute. I don't have to pick up that phone. I don't have to answer the phone right now. And when she gets back to me next week, or I meet her for coffee like we've arranged, you can say, yeah, I've been really, really busy. I haven't been able to take any phone calls. And that is self-love. Or you could even text her and say, it's not a good time right now. I'll call you back when I have some free time. These boundaries, these responses are healthy ways to challenge your codependency. But truly, many of these powerful codependent relationships actually are teaching us to be masters. And some of the main ones, maybe one or two in your life, maybe your marriage or maybe your father or your mother, they are often pre-birth agreements that you would have this dynamic so that you would truly learn to love yourself. So it is making you a master of self-love, of accountability, and all that good stuff. So I think I'll leave it there. If you enjoy this video, you can smash the like button, and of course you can subscribe, and you can click the join button if you want to become a member. Let's do more on this. I think there's a lot deeper we can go, but that's just put a few layers in place for you to think about, and hopefully you'll remember this message the next time somebody tries to activate and press that codependent button in you, because you don't need to have that anymore. The new earth is 5D frequency. We are leaving, that's all. Codependency is a classic 3D blueprint. We're leaving it behind, my friends. We're leaving it behind. The light in me, recognize the light in you.